Hello, Fathers Faithful. Thank you for joining me for Sunday School this week. Today's lesson is on the power of words. I was reading in the book of Judges this week when I was reminded of something that Josh, our oldest son, said to me many, many years ago. Most of you know that Josh went to Boston University after he graduated from UNC for medical school. And after he was there for a while, he said something that I will never forget. He said, "Mom, I need to thank you for something." Now, as parents, those words are always nice, but we don't hear them nearly as often as we would like to. And I remember saying, "For what?" And he said, "For making me use proper grammar when I was growing up at home." Of all the things he could have thanked me for, grammar wasn't even on my list. I had never even thought about that. But he said, when I got to Boston, I realized that I already had one strike against me because of my southern accent. But speaking properly helped people listen to what I had to say instead of being distracted by how I said it. You know, people often make judgments fairly or unfairly based on speech. Words matter. The way we communicate matters. Not because perfect grammar makes us any better than anybody else. It doesn't. But because words carry influence. Have you ever heard someone say just one sentence and immediately know something about them? You knew whether they were angry or whether they were kind or whether they loved Jesus, whether they were bitter or whether they were proud. Sometimes it only takes one word. Years ago, we were on a trip out west, and it was the trip where I was pining over David. We had just started dating and only dated a few months at that time. But we went with our family out to Oregon, where my daddy was stationed in the Air Force. And I remember when we got there, the six of us were together, and I went up to order my food, and I ordered a cheeseburger and french fries like I always did. But this time I got a completely different reaction from the workers at that McDonald's. Before I got my food, the girl at the counter had called every single employee in the store up to the front to listen to me talk. She kept saying, "Say French fries again, say French fries again," only she didn't say fries like I did. Today's lesson is from the book of Judges, and in Judges 12, one word determined whether a man lived or died, believe it or not, and the word was shibboleth. So, let me go back to this story. It is a story about a man named Jephthah. Now, Judges 11 tells us that Jephthah was a mighty warrior, but he was also the son of a prostitute. His father was Gilead, but because Jephthah's mother was not his father's wife and the mother of his half-brothers, they didn't want anything to do with him. So when they grew older, they actually drove Jephthah away. So he left home and he settled in the land of Tob, where a group of adventurers gathered around him. Now, some translations of the Bible describe them as worthless fellows, but I don't think they were necessarily evil men. Most likely they were just outcast, forgotten people, men who had nowhere else to go. So Jephthah is living as an exile because of circumstances that he never chose. Then the Ammonites declared war against Israel. And suddenly the very same leaders who had rejected Jephthah realized that they needed that mighty warrior. So they traveled to Tob to ask him to become their commander. After some discussion, Jephthah agreed. Not because he was seeking revenge and not because he wanted recognition, but because Israel needed a deliverer. So Jephthah was a Gileadite, Gilead was not one of the 12 tribes, if you remember, but a region east of the Jordan River. Now, much of that region belonged to the half tribe of Manasseh, the older son of Joseph. Now, if you remember your Old Testament history, then you know that Joseph had two sons. Manasseh was older, and Ephraim was the younger son. And when Jacob blessed them in Genesis 48, he deliberately crossed his hands and gave the greater blessing to Ephraim instead of to Manasseh. And from that point forward, Ephraim became one of the most influential tribes in Israel. So Jephthah had become Israel's deliverer. The man who had once been rejected by his own family was now called on to save the nation. And God had given him victory over the Ammonites, and it should have been a time of celebration. But not everyone was celebrating. Listen to what the Bible says in Judges 12, 1 through 6. The Ephraimite forces were called out, and they crossed over to Zaphon. They said to Jephthah, "Why did you go fight the Ammonites without calling us to go with you? We're going to burn down your house over your head." Jephthah answered, "I and my people were engaged in a great struggle with the Ammonites, and although I called you, you didn't save me out of their hands. When I saw that you wouldn't help, I took my life in my hands and crossed over to fight the Ammonites, and the Lord gave me the victory over them. Now, why have you come up today to fight me?" Jephthah then called together the men of Gilead and fought against Ephraim. The Gileadites struck them down because the Ephraimites had said, "You Gileadites are renegades from Ephraim and Manasseh." The Gileadites captured the fords of the Jordan leading to Ephraim, and whenever a survivor of Ephraim said, "Let me cross over," the men of Gilead asked him, "Are you an Ephraimite?" If he replied no, they said, "All right, say Shibboleth." If he said Sibboleth, because he could not pronounce the word correctly, they seized him and killed him at the fords of the Jordan. 42,000 Ephraimites were killed at that time. Now, the Ephraimites didn't ask, "What happened? Did you need our help?" No, they came with accusations and they came with threats. They even said, "We're going to burn your house down." And Jephthah answered by saying, "I did call you." In essence, he said, when we needed you, you didn't come. Now, whether the Ephraimites ignored his request or whether there had simply been a misunderstanding, the Bible doesn't say. What is clear, though, is that neither side was willing to yield. And this disagreement became a battle, and that battle became a tragedy. The Ephraimites could not pronounce the SH sound. They said Sibboleth, and that tiny difference exposed who they really were. 42,000 men died because their speech revealed their identity. It sounds harsh to us, maybe, but the story teaches an unforgettable principle, and that is words show who we really are. Long before psychologists talked about speech patterns or communication styles, God had already shown that what comes out of our mouths tells the truth about what is inside of us. The third chapter of James in the New Testament warns us about words. James 2, 9 through 12 says this, "With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. Can both fresh water and salt water flow from the same spring? My brothers and sisters, can a fig tree bear olives or a grapevine bear figs? Neither can a salt spring produce fresh water." Words influence, don't they? Words build, but words can also destroy. You know that old sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me? Not true. We find that out very early as we're growing up. Every day we speak thousands of words. We might think that most of them disappear into thin air, but none of them disappear from God's notice. Jesus himself said in Matthew 12:34, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. The mouth is like the dashboard warning on a car. The light isn't the problem. It simply tells you that there is a problem underneath. And our words expose what lives inside of us. When criticism pours out, bitterness was already there. When gossip pours out, envy was already there. When encouragement pours out, grace was already there. Words don't create the condition, they reveal it. And that's why the shibboleth story is so powerful. One little word exposed an entire identity. James says our everyday conversations do exactly the same thing. James gives us three pictures. A horse is guided by a tiny bit. A massive ship is steered by a small rudder. A great forest is destroyed by one spark. Small things, huge consequences. Every single marriage has either been strengthened or wounded by words. Churches have split because of words. Children carry encouraging words from their parents for 50 years. But sadly, they also remember those hurtful words too. Proverbs 18:21 says, death and life are in the power of the tongue. Think about that. God created the universe by speaking. Our words don't create worlds, but they certainly shape them, don't they? One sentence can change someone's entire day. One careless remark can scar someone for decades. And one sincere apology can heal years of hurt. Words matter because people matter. James says, no one can tame the tongue. Now, that sounds discouraging, but James isn't saying that improvement is impossible. He's saying that the tongue really isn't a disease. It's only a symptom. Imagine placing a bucket under a leaking roof. The bucket catches the water, but it never fixes the roof. Many people try to fix their speech that way. Well, I'll just be nicer. I'll just try harder. I'll just count to 10 before I speak. Helpful? Maybe. But is that enough? No, it's not enough. Because eventually, what's in the heart leaks back out. James says fresh water and salt water cannot come from the same spring. A healthy tree doesn't produce rotten fruit. The issue is always the source. And Jesus agreed. Out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks, he said. If our speech consistently tears people down, then God doesn't simply want us to clean up our vocabulary, our words. No, he wants to transform our hearts. Paul tells us in Ephesians 29, let no corrupt communication proceed from your mouth. Instead, speak words that build up. Speak truth. Speak with grace. Speak forgiveness. Speak encouragement. Imagine every single conversation asking one question. Will these words that I'm speaking right now lead this person closer to Jesus than before I spoke? That one question would transform homes. It would transform marriages and churches. It would transform social media. It would completely transform our witness. Years ago, doctors developed a simple way to diagnose certain heart problems. They didn't begin with surgery. They simply listened. A stethoscope revealed what the heart was doing. Now, the instrument doesn't create the heartbeat, it exposes it. Our words are God's stethoscope. They reveal the condition of our spiritual heart. And every conversation, every text, every Facebook comment, every family discussion, every single disagreement is revealing something. The question isn't just, what did I say? The deeper question is, what kind of heart produced those words? The men at the Jordan River could not hide behind appearances. One word exposed them. James would say, or James says, that we can't hide behind our appearance either. Our speech continually tells about our hearts. So maybe our prayer this week shouldn't simply be, Lord, help me watch my tongue. Maybe it should be, Lord, change my heart. Fill it so completely with your grace and your truth, your love, and your spirit that when I speak, Jesus is what people hear. Because when God changes the heart, He changes the words. And when He changes the words, He changes lives. Think about that this week. Thank you again for the prayers that you've prayed for our family and our church family. We will continue to pray for yours. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you again next week. Thanks for listening.